you.
I understand that Ms. Lemos-Otero showed up. If she could come forward, and Jeremy Brosowsky, who's with Agricity, if he's here, come forward, please. Is William Mann here? Yes. If you'd come forward, and Jeff Kennedy, if he's here. And then we'll turn to the executive. Ms. Lemos-Otero?
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. I apologize for my lateness, but thank you for having me today. So thank you, Council Members Mendelson and Evans, for calling this hearing to discuss the DC Urban Agriculture and Food Security Act of 2014. I'm here to testify about the importance of this piece of legislation that has the potential to reshape the urban landscape in DC. My name is Rebecca Lemos-Otero, and I'm a lifelong resident and co-executive director of City Blossoms, an organization dedicated to kid-driven, community-engaging, creative green spaces. I am here representing the hundreds of children, families, volunteers, and city residents that collaborate annually with us to create urban edible gardens in DC. City Blossoms is a locally based organization that to date has worked on over 40 projects in all wards of the city. One of our enterprises are called Community Green Spaces, and it's an example of currently existing partnerships between landowners and growers. We currently maintain the Girard Children's Community Garden and the Marion Street Intergenerational Garden. Originally, these two privately owned lots were underused parcels of land that attracted both litter and crime. Over 6 years ago, an agreement was made between City Blossoms and the two different owners for the spaces for long-term leases. To our knowledge, this was an unusual partnership in the city. If we fast forward to present day, both of these gardens are well established, produce hundreds of pounds of harvest yearly that is distributed amongst participants, volunteers, and nearby food banks, and are sites for events, free programming, and relaxation for over 1,000 visitors annually. This has been an eye-opening experience and a model we would like to continue replicating around the city. However, it's a real challenge finding available land, and not so much because it doesn't exist, but more because there's little incentive for landowners and developers to consider options such as urban agriculture as short and long-term possibilities. In our agreement with the owner of the land where Marion Street Garden is located, City Blossoms currently pays all land taxes and fees, and every year City Blossoms has to raise the funds to cover these expenses. An act such as the one being discussed today would not only incentivize landowners and developers to consider making similar partnerships, but would help alleviate owners' concerns and fears regarding this slightly unorthodox solution to blighted and underused land by encouraging private district landowners to lease their land for agricultural purposes through tax abatement, and enabling urban farmers and groups such as City Blossoms to sell their produce both on and off lease land, bringing fresh food access to neighborhoods across the city, including those currently identified as food deserts. We would also like the Act to, if possible, encourage public and private landowners to give longer-term land leases, 10 years or more, when possible, establish a land trust to ensure land tenure for farming, add urban agriculture to the list of activities that exempt properties from property tax, and back tax forgiveness for private landowners who contribute land to a trust. We have experienced firsthand the incredibly positive outcomes that can result with these forms of partnerships that encourage bringing more agriculture and nature into our quickly developing city. We see children and adults alike consistently finding a sense of contentment and well-being through their experiences with these spaces, as well as a movement of local and innovative entrepreneurship. We have also witnessed the positive outcomes of similar movements in cities like New York and Baltimore. I would like to applaud the Council today for considering the potential outcomes this Act could produce, and thank you all for allowing me the time to share my own experiences with you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brozowski.
Thank you, Chairman Mendelson. My name is Jeremy Brosowsky, and I'm the founder of a local company called Agricity. We set out 4 years ago to build an urban sustainability business focused on building healthier, more sustainable, more productive cities, starting with our own here in Washington, D.C. And our first project is called Compost Cab. And basically, we set out to do two things: make it easier for people to compost in the city and make it easier for urban agriculture to thrive. The making it easier for people to compost in the city part has turned out to be relatively easy. I live in Mount Pleasant. I have 4 small children. We do all of the sorts of things that you say that people theoretically want to do. We shop locally, we eat locally, we try not to waste. And we've gotten to the point where my family alone has about 1 bag of trash a week for 6 people. Why? Because we've gotten really good at composting and recycling. And the good news is it's really not that hard to do. The second part of our mission, supporting urban agriculture so that it can thrive, turned out to be much more difficult than we expected. And the reason is that it is really, really hard to grow food in the city. And while there is an opportunity for entrepreneurs, social and otherwise, to build here in the city, anything that we can do as a government to facilitate the process, to make it just a little bit easier. Farming is hard. I discovered very early on, initially I thought that I would be an urban farmer. I even went out to study with a guy named Will Allen in Milwaukee to learn all about how urban farming works. And this is, and it took, I don't know, a couple of weeks there for me to realize that I wasn't a farmer. It is really, really hard work. And the people that do it every day, some of whom have been here today, others that we've partnered with over time, like, this is really, really hard work. The last thing that they have time to do is worry about paperwork, infrastructure, working towards all of the little details that have absolutely nothing to do with the act of growing food on a day-to-day basis. And all I think we ever hear people looking for is for the government to help make it just a little bit easier. This bill does that, and it is an extraordinarily good start, and we are encouraged. But as so many of my colleagues and friends and partners who have spoken earlier today have pointed out, there is more that we can be doing. And to your question earlier, Mr. Mendelson, about why 3 years as opposed to why is 3 years not enough, and bringing organic matter to remediate the soil, these things actually don't happen overnight. It takes time to build new soil. It takes time to put food in the ground and to see a yield on it. But the bigger question, and when you talk, Mr. Brazeau, when you talk about scalability and you talk about the importance of growing food at scale in the city, that is a very different animal than quarter-acre lots, and community gardens, and all of which play an extraordinarily important part in the overall urban agriculture ecosystem, but that are not about producing food at scale. So what we know from studying urban agriculture in America, if you take a look at the 30 largest markets in this country, and take a look at the urban farms, not community gardens, not school gardens but the urban farms in these cities, there's about 1 for every 700,000 people. We're not even close. And so the good news is there is an opportunity for D.C. not to just try to catch up, there's some rhetoric about Cleveland and other cities around that. We believe that Washington can be the city on the hill, that Washington can be the model that everybody follows, but it doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you, Mr. Brosowsky. Mr. Mann.
Yes, good afternoon. The first thing I'd like to do is thank whoever had the young people over here. I didn't see anybody recognize them in the forum, so I know most of them are gone, but that's a good thing there. I'm going to keep my situation simple and speak from the heart. I live on West Virginia Avenue over by Gallaudet University, and I just got tired from leaving the metro station, coming down M Street, walking past Gallaudet up West Virginia Avenue, and just seeing trash everywhere. So I started with the tree boxes, in the area. This is the city law on tree box beautification. And I started with that basically because I thought that, one, it was a small enough area for me to be able to work with my own limited funds, and that it would provide plants and beautification and whatnot for the community. And I also felt that it would be a catalyst into the gardening, especially for our seniors, which Ward 5 and whatnot, I think half the seniors in Ward 5 are over 65 living alone. Ideally, I would hope and whatnot that maybe the children from the community would be able to work with it, but I quickly found out and whatnot that you were dealing with people like 20 and up. So that what I'm seeing from the testimony that I've heard from all the people and everything there, and I think one of the strongest things I can say is that we definitely have a group of people and whatnot from farming and whatnot to dealing with children in different aspects of agriculture. And I think that that is a positive thing for the children, especially east side of the city, okay, 5, 7, and 8 wards and everything there, because we do have a major problem about unemployment, okay, with people in general and younger people specifically. These projects and whatnot over at Noma and everything there are not hiring the people and whatnot in my area that I can see, okay, there, and I can look at the license tags on the vehicles, and they're all saying Maryland, Virginia. So I think that in terms of what they're talking about with the children and people in general, doing something green is an important thing. One of the things that I just found out about a week or two ago is that if you're in a red zone, okay, then your proposals are one that are supposed to be accepted for the simple fact that you're in a red zone. Okay, so what I would like to do from what I'm doing and collaborating with other individuals is identify the red zones and turn the red zones green. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, City Council members. First, let me say thank you for having the opportunity to testify on this bill. And I'd like to thank Mr. Grossa for starting another conversation in the District of Columbia around the quality of life and social justice issues. Once again, he has shown leadership and foresight. I haven't had an opportunity to clearly vet this particular bill, but I do want to speak from my personal experience of the importance of green space and teaching children how to farm at very early ages. This is something that, before I go there, this is something that should be in the comprehensive plans for the District of Columbia. How do we incorporate green space and gardens and healthy living into our plans that we have for our city? So thank you for getting this conversation moving along. In my personal story, recently I just lost my 2 best friends, basically to cancer. They were both 52 years old, frat brothers. And both of them died from aspartame, from eating aspartame, which is full of artificial sweeteners. And seeing one of my friends die and being told that he had candida in his blood, I didn't know what candida was until over 6 weeks ago. So being told that he had candida, which is basically yeast in his blood, was a horrifying shock to me. But what's even more horrifying, it was the same food companies that do so much damage, and the same groups that do so much damage in so many different areas of life in the District of Columbia, especially our horrid educational policies, which we push on children. So I just wanted to get that out the way. When I was teaching at Emory, we had a neighborhood garden, school garden, which we used to take children out at least once a week and let them garden for science. So these 3rd graders learned from a very early age the ability to develop a green thumb and to work with foods and different things that you can explain to children. You could talk about gardening and what dirt felt like and different products and chemicals, but actually picking and growing tomatoes at school was a very valuable lesson, one that they hold on for life, that they still talk about. Since the school was closed, as you know, those children no longer have that opportunity. So I just wanted to mention that. I think if we look at Michelle Obama's recent struggle to keep sodium, sugar, and salt out of foods, out of schools, how hard it is to fight against the agribusiness. So once again, I thank Mr. Grosso again for doing something that's forward thinking in the City Council of the District of Columbia. I can't tell you about the amount of children diabetes and obesity that this nation and this city faces. We have the largest health disparities in the world in this city. And it's basically because of a lot of the legislation that this city council pushes forward. So I do believe that there should be some level of mandatory education for children that is taught through science at very early ages that allow children to live a healthy lifestyle and have their parents understand some of the things that they're eating. Thank you for allowing me to testify on the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I just have one question. Mr. Brosowsky, in your testimony, you said that one of the things that Agricity does is to make it easier to compost.
Correct.
What does that mean?
So it means exactly what it sounds like. So if you live in a rural environment or even a suburban environment, virtually anyone who has the will can compost in their backyard. It's not that complicated. It's basically layering what we call green material and brown material on top of each other and taking advantage of nature's natural tendency to break things down and taking the resulting material and using it in your garden. If you live in the city, if you're an apartment dweller, if you live in a row house in virtually any neighborhood in the city, space is at a premium, and just as importantly, there are real concerns. You have neighbors who will be concerned about odors. There's always concerned about what we call vectors, which everybody else calls rodents or rats, and these are real concerns. And so creating a system within the city that enables composting but while addressing the unique challenges of an urban environment is something that somebody needed to do. And we were trying to solve a very personal problem. I live in Mount Pleasant. I've got 4 kids. I've got no backyard to speak of. We've got rats in the alley like nobody's business. So what did we do? We created a system that worked for us, and then we started selling it to other people. And so basically what it is our system is a sealed container into which food scraps are placed. Once a week, we pick them up, and then we transport in this containerized environment. So in the 4 years we've been operating, we've had not a single complaint about rodents, not one. We've had not a single complaint about odors, not one. And that's because we've put a system of infrastructure in place that works, and more importantly, we've reinforced it every day, every week, month after month after month, with education and communication that gets people to care about it. So it's one thing to put the infrastructure in place. It's another thing entirely to get people to use it properly. So when we talk about urban agriculture in this city, as you know, Steve from Washington Parts and People talked about earlier, there is no shortage of green space in Washington, D.C. Putting that green space to its best and highest use is an entirely different matter. And to do so requires, the will, and it also requires training. To your point, there's no point in turning over land to somebody who isn't going to be able to put it to good use. And while we can quibble over whether or not there's value in a DC resident restriction or not, if you're trying to attract the best possible farmers, I think everyone would agree that what you want is people who have real expertise on the ground making things go. On the composting front, we didn't see any movement on that locally, and frankly, on a national basis, community-based composting, which is what we care about, using the food waste stream to produce food in the city for the communities that are producing the waste, is the kind of closed-loop system that we care about. So when you look down the road at composting is usually thrown in to the realm of waste management and large-scale infrastructure. And when you're trying to do it on a municipal scale, it has to be. There is never going to be a clean enough stream of materials coming out of your large waste producers that it would be appropriate to handle in a small pocket-like environment in and around in small parts of the city. So you're going to want larger scale facilities to handle that in the same way that you're not going to try to grow 50 acres of corn in Northeast. Like, that's just not where you're going to grow corn. It's going to have to happen in an industrial environment somewhere else. But community composting, the kind of composting that we're talking about, you can maximize for quality or you can maximize for quantity. You can seldom maximize for both. And if you believe that urban agriculture is a piece of the puzzle for sustainable cities, then you need good soil. There are 2 ways to grow food in the city. There's the aeroponic hydroponic model, which is very capital intensive and requires a specific kind of real estate. And then there's the fertile soil model, which lets you maximize your per square foot production by planting your plants closer together, which you can do because of the fertility of the soil. That's the business that we set out to be in. And fundamentally, the biggest challenge is we need more places to put material. We need more places to grow soil so we can grow more food. And so that's what we're working on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Grasso.
I just thank you for all your testimony, and I don't have any questions. Thank you.
We're going to thank you all. Thank you for your testimony.